I stayed all night, freezing to death in the hill situated at the right hand of the Nafarrete. We've been sent there to relieve the exhausted battalion UGT number 14, also known as Azaña Guipúzcoa. The enemy was very close, 200 meters from us, occupying another hill. We attacked and captured 13 prisoners of the U34 regiment that has been in that hill for 2 days. We took the hill, but people died like if they were ants. That was something sad for each side, as lots of young people died in that position. I don't remember its name, but I call it Nafarrete's butcher's house. The combats there were even harder than in Villareal. Good morning, I'm Pep, and this is the Spanish Civil War. In this channel and for the next 3 years, we will cover the Spanish Civil War week by week, its battles, and the Holocaust that it provoked. Today, we would like to share some good news with you. This project was meant to be an open space where to bring light to the history of Spain. And we decided to do so in English because since the late 19th century, as a secondary power, if so, Spain has been subject to international developments, and that would continue after the Spanish Civil War and the Second World War. I am a childcare worker in Scotland, and during these last few months I've tried to bring you the best I could the history of the Spanish Civil War, and at the same time I've carried on with my job. I had to start bringing you episodes every 2 weeks because of the amount of work. But I've always had somebody helping me. At the beginning, it was my girlfriend Silvia Franco. Yes, a funny surname for my girlfriend. Then came Chris Garber from Ohio helping me with my terrible English. And now we've got Ollie Powell, a British historian that will start working with some special episodes from Madrid. The first one will be coming shortly. But that's not all, because I would like to welcome also to our family Joan Garcia, that will help with historical data and with sound effects. Thanks to all of you that made possible this experience, and we would like to invite everybody to join us. We're not asking only for financial help, but also for information, ideas, so keep joining us. The Spanish Civil War wants you. After this brief introduction to our new family members, let's go to the fray. Last week, we covered the end of the Pozuelo offensive, also known as the first battle for the A Coruña road, that concluded with a Republican victory after the loyalist reinforcements managed to counterattack and recover their positions at the south of Pozuelo. We've also covered the beginning of a strategic offensive carried on by the Republican Army of the North, that even with great numbers stalled after the first days of battle. On the international stage, we talked about some decisions made by the Non-Intervention Committee and how Mussolini, behind the scenes, met with his general staff and Wilhelm Canaris in order to plan further intervention in Spain. This week looks pretty interesting, and it will become more interesting because the Francoist Catholic forces, not happy with the result of the first battle for the A Coruña road, plan to start another offensive on Sunday with similar objectives. But they will be forced to postpone the assault until next week due to the fog. So let's start in the north, where the strategic offensive aimed at Vitoria started last week, and where the brave Gudaris started to play in blood for their lack of training and experience, with frontal assaults against the small garrison of Villareal. By the end of the week, Ciutat, chief of the Army of the North, ordered the column of Aizpuru, 5,000 strong, to attack Murguia. Again, some progress was made during the first day of the attack, but by this Tuesday, the 8th, an outnumbered nationalist force, 500 strong, managed to stop Aizpuru's forces and drive them back to their starting position. That same black day, the loyalist army of the north, the rebels started a counterattack in the area surrounding Villareal. They captured the heights of Saimendi, and after that, those of Nafarrete, where the Basque Cordexole battalion suffered terribly at the hands of the nationalist bombers and the Moors, suffering 102 casualties, among them the battalion commander, Daniel Jimeno. We've started our episode with a quote by a veteran of the Churcundia battalion about how hard the fight in that area was. That same day, in the church of San Miguel Arcángel of Vitoria, a Te Deum was celebrated to thank God for the defensive victory in the Battle of Villareal, even though the battle was not over yet. The Gudaris had to accept they would not seize Villareal, and they decided to continue pounding it with artillery. The bombardments of the 9th, 10th, and 11th were the biggest ones of the whole offensive. At night, the Gudaris will shout to the defenders, "You've won, but we'll bury you alive." The 12th of December, their artillery obliterated the fortifications at the north of the village, burying the defenders. Even though the town was not going to fall. The 10th, another attempt was made to take the city with a frontal assault, supported by Russian BA-6, but the attackers didn't manage to get closer than 300 meters from the village. In the skies, on the 8th, the Republican Air Force bombed Vitoria, but the 9th, when they came back to repeat the feat, they were welcomed by nationalist planes that dispersed them, causing the loss of 2 planes. Another fight in the skies takes place the 12th, after the bombardment of L'Aqua, with the loss of a loyalist monospar and 2 nationalist Henkels. But it also looked like the Francoist forces were gaining the initiative in the skies. But we'll leave the north for now. We'll come back to it next week, because now we have to go back to the center, where next week an offensive will kick off, known as the Second Battle of the A Coruña Road, or, spoiler alert, Battle of the Fog. This week, in the center, in Madrid, something that we've already seen in the past appears again. We saw back in September how the Republican forces planned to blow up the Alcázar of Toledo using mines, like the ones used in the First World War. Death will come now also from below. The 11th of December, 39 legionarios will die after a mine blew away part of the clinic hospital. We've already talked about that. Even if main offensive will be happening one after another, with each side trying to gain control of more resources or trying to avoid the enemy doing so, a daily death toll continued in the quiet sectors. The battle for Madrid ended 20 days ago, and yet the siege of Madrid will continue claiming lives. In the seas this week, the Republican submarine C3 will be destroyed by the German U34 near Malaga. The U34 is there in complete secrecy without any German flag or sign. But Italian and German intervention is something already known to everybody. In a meeting of representatives of the International Federation of Trade Unions and the Labour and Socialist International held in Valencia this week, there was again a denouncement and complaint about the fascist powers' intervention in the Spanish Civil War. This week, the Republic itself will have also the chance to denounce this intervention on the 10th, but also the 11th. The first day, Álvarez del Vayo will denounce the Spanish situation in front of the League of Nations against the USSR's wishes, putting high emphasis on Italian and German intervention. But the League of Nations has already shown its willingness to stop the ambitions of these militaristic regimes. It showed it after Haile Selassie asked for intervention in response to the Italian invasion of Ethiopia. And it also showed lack of strength with Japan back in 1933. Now, this was not a country in the Far East, nor an African country. It was in the cradle of Europe. But that's what appeasement was about. Even though we talked last week about a plan for international mediation and even Portugal, one of the main objectors at the beginning, in the end accepted a mediation if the terms were reasonable, Germany and Italy instead stated that none of the combatants, neither the loyalist forces nor the Francoists, would accept any mediation. And that was true. Neither the Spanish Republic nor Francoist Spain would accept it. In fact, the Spanish press, both Republican and nationalist, seemed to agree on that. No international mediation would be accepted. As the European powers tried to decide the fate of Spain, and the poor country continued bleeding to death because of their deeply rooted social conflicts, Italy, Germany, and the USSR continued their involvement behind the scenes. And it's there, behind the scenes, where we left Mussolini last week, together with the Italian Chief of Staff and Wilhelm Canaris, head of the German Abwehr. We've talked about how Germany pressed Italy in taking the lead in helping the Francoist forces, considering that Germany should avoid any exposure that could threaten its rearmament plan. After this meeting took place last week, Mario Roata will be proclaimed chief of the Italian forces in Spain. With this look at the international stage, we'll head towards the rearguard now, where deaths, as we've seen, are common. We've mentioned weeks ago how an anarchist, García Oliver, was made Minister for Justice, and how he tried to work in order to get Melchor Rodríguez, the man that managed to prevent the Paracuellos massacre for 1 week, as Madrid's delegate for prison. This week, this nomination will take place, and the massacre that we finished talking about 2 weeks ago will be definitively closed. Even though, as we saw last week after the bombardment of the Palacio del Infantado, saccas will take place from time to time in Republican-controlled territory. Also, this week, García Oliver will establish that commerce in the black market will be punished with prison sentences in Republican-controlled zone. We already talked about the fact that the Republic was starting to experience food shortages. If we check the area the nationalist and the loyalist forces control, we can see that mostly the rural central Spain was in nationalist hands, meanwhile the Republic had the major industrial centers, except for Sevilla. Controlling the rural areas meant that the nationalist forces had the biggest food production. In fact, the Republic relied heavily on exports, not only of food, but also of raw materials they needed to run their industry. To worsen this situation, we have now a Francoist naval blockade ongoing, threatening the Republic's supplies. And also, its few exports are mainly citrus from the fertile Levant, where during this month some conflicts will arise between the local agricultural committees and the central Valencian government. And this will be all for this week, with the Basque Gudaris pounding the nationalist forces in Villareal, the promise of another battle for the A Coruña road, and the discussion of Spanish intervention at the League of Nations. Here you've got the link to our episode covering the past week of war, so you can see how the Basque strategic offensive began and how the first battle for the A Coruña road ended. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe. If you enjoyed it, share it. We have to bring light to the history of Spain. If you're able to support us in our Patreon channel, as these heroes already did, or offer us a coffee, this would be also great and would help us to carry on and improve the project. Let's make this possible together. Thanks for your attention, goodbye and salute.